Oh no, that's two webcams. That's not how that's supposed to work. Stop it. Stop it. Stop it. Turn off that webcam. Good morning, everyone. Welcome to 3 Beers Deep, my weekly Q&A show, which has been live on Twitch for the last few weeks. It's supposed to be on Monday mornings, but last week I was traveling back from PAX. Yesterday was Labor Day, and I didn't get back until late in the afternoon from hanging out in ye olde Wisconsin. But hopefully everyone had a great weekend. Hope everyone had a great Labor Day weekend. I'm going to try if I can read it. Oh, no, this way. Get that adjusted more in the setter. Got loaded up on Twitch. Got some folks hanging out. I've got some questions here ready to roll. So if you've never watched 3 Beers Deep before, it is, like I said, my weekly Q&A show. You can drop questions into the Twitch chat or send them in ahead of time to patrickklepek.tumblr.com, and I will take a look at them. I will judge them, and occasionally, once in a while, I'll answer them. So feel free to drop some in the Twitch chat while we start out with Krigsidom. Hey Patrick, I was wondering if you've ever thought through the argument of separating art from artists, being able to appreciate Roman Polanski's work while recognizing he's a terrible human being. Or what if we find out the Beatles were serial killers, still being able to appreciate the music while finding what they did reprehensible? I've been mulling it over the past few days and wanted someone else's outlook. I have to assume that what they are alluding to is sort of something we've touched on in previous Q&As, in which, do you have an ethical or moral dilemma around the release of Metal Gear Solid 5, The Phantom Pain, how Konami has treated some of its workforce, treated Hideo Kojima, and whether buying The Phantom Pain is a tacit endorsement of those work conditions, sort of in the same way that, we often hear, there are a lot of think pieces every time Apple announces a new iPhone, in which, what is our moral and ethical responsibility as humans to the rest of society, given that when we indulge in the purchase of millions, tens of millions, hundreds of millions of iPhones every year, that, to find the rare minerals that are required to produce those phones, that is often exploiting slave or poor labor in other countries. And I think, that calculus is different for everyone. I think it's, at the very least, you should be informed of what you're buying so that you can make an informed decision, even if one that's you slightly feel bad about. I mean, obviously, you can't live the world a 100% ethical, 100% moral life. Indulging in society's everyday comforts. There is someone that unfortunately is getting the short end of the stick on that, and so the idea of the Beatles being serial killers and Roman Polanski, who obviously has a troubled would be a minor way of putting it. History in regards to how he has treated minors in the past. You can go ahead and look that up if you want to feel weird for the rest of the day. Obviously, what we're talking about with Hideo Kojima, Konami, and Metal Gear Solid 5, slightly different territory. But I think that's the question, broadly speaking, is a very individual one. The question about how to feel in regards to an artist, how they handle themselves, an artist's work. That you may feel differently about is an individual calculus. And I think there are going to be some people who draw a hard line on that, who say that, that's just not something I can stand behind, that's not something that I can participate in, that I am economically supporting an individual who is committed a reprehensible act or been a party to a reprehensible act. And I think for other people, they'll go, well, yes, that's all true, but what I personally get out of their work is incredible and worthwhile, and it is not something I'm willing to sort of draw a line in the sand on. So curious what other people, I whacked my microphone, think about that topic, because obviously that falls differently for everyone else, and people are going to have different thoughts on how that actually sort of works out. Farinelli, working as a transition from that topic, what are Scoop's honest thoughts on The Phantom Pain? So yesterday was the first time that I actually got to spend some significant time with the game. I plucked in kind of an hour and a half previously, but unfortunately just haven't had time. There's a lot going on in my personal life. Things are good. Things are fine. I just have a lot of my evenings being taken up by different things, which is a problem, given the fact that there are a lot of video games out right now that I very much want to play. Yesterday, I finally had sort of a solid 4 or 5 hours to sit down, really get into the gameplay, start to dissect what that game is exactly, and to see how I feel about it. And I mean, I'm happy to report that I think it's excellent. I really am enjoying a game whose story I don't understand at all, and whose characters I don't have full context for, and as it turns out, I don't really care right now. I'm having a great. It's amazing for the first time in the series history. Now, obviously, Ground Zeroes accounts in this. If we're, I'm kind of looping them in or lumping them in together. To play a Metal Gear game that plays how you want to play a video game, right? So like the controls have always been one of the weakest points of the Metal Gear Solid franchise, and I feel like with the Phantom Pain that Kojima Productions has finally nailed. I can do what I want to do, whether it's I want to play it like a shooter, whether it's I want to play it stealthy, whether I want to do a hybrid of the two. I have found that when I've been playing through missions, one, I don't worry about the grades. I just kind of chuck that out the window. If for some reason I fall so deeply in love with the Phantom Pain that I want to play through it a second time, that seems hard to imagine, not because of that I couldn't love the Phantom Pain, but because playing through a 40-hour game a second time just is not something I can usually do with my workload. But I am able to play the game in a way that I don't constantly feel frustrated, which is often how I have felt playing the Metal Gear games, in which I may enjoy them for all sorts of eccentric reasons, the stylistic reasons that Kojima is certainly known for. His flourishes are famous or infamous, depending on how you feel about them, for that reason. But the moments when I have fumbled, when I'm still kind of grasping the mechanics and the different things that I can do and the ways that I can approach missions with a much open-ended spectrum that is available in the Phantom Pain, when I've screwed that up, I haven't felt the need to just restart to the last checkpoint. I haven't felt the need to start the mission over. I did that once because I bungled it so badly that I wanted to just kind of get a fresh take on it, but I haven't done that for the last couple of missions. I'm up through mission 5, the Honeybee. It's the first boss battle when you fight the weird zombie creatures in the mist. That's the mission I finished before I went to bed last night. And that was a mission in which several times I got myself into trouble. I had to pull out an AK-47 or whatever the equivalent is that I'm carrying around, shoot up some dudes, but then I was able to go stealthy again. I was able to navigate between action and stealth in a way that series has never been able to find a balance that at least made me happy, that at least allowed me to accommodate for a play style that wants to be stealthy until I fail the stealth. I'm not huge into the trial and error aspect. I don't want to have to start a mission over just because I messed up going around the corner or if I got to flag someone. So in the Phantom Pain, what I'm enjoying is the fact that I've given a range of freedom that allows me a lot of versatility as a player that has been really, really enjoyable. So I'm curious what other people have been feeling about that. Jake Lafayette, we get spoilers and stream instead. If that is not a spoiler, my friend. That is, come on. I know that people are sensitive about their Metal Gear, but we're a week in, and that is something 3 hours into the game. So let's take it back. But I appreciate people being sensitive about that. I know that people take their Metal Gear awfully seriously. Nabashin 186, thoughts on the Witcher 3 expansion? Is it something you actually have time for, or will you make time? I will absolutely make time. Witcher 3 is one of my favorite games this year. When they put on an expansion, I'm going to be all over that. They have not announced details. I know that the first one is supposed to come out in October, but we haven't seen any screenshots or trailers for it yet. They wrapped up their free DLC a little while ago, which means sometime later this month or early next month would be right around when we should be hearing about the details on that expansion. But yes, depending on where I'm at in all these games, I suppose it's possible that The Witcher 3 will have to slide a little bit. I'm actually just happy that I finished The Witcher 3, given that I've talked to all sorts of people that have not finished The Witcher 3, period. So the fact that I've kind of put that behind me, even though I ignored Skellige in the process, or at least the majority of Skellige in the process, I'm hoping they're going to take some risks. I obviously more Witcher 3, just more Witcher 3 would be fine. But I'm hoping they take some risks in the storytelling. I hope they take some risks in the gameplay in a way that kind of freshens up a game that I spent a significant amount of hours with and would be happy to spend more hours with it. But I think CD Projekt Red hopefully has some ambitions beyond just here are some more missions. Anonymous asks, have you ever cared for the lore, not the narrative, in a video game? With the hype of Fallout 4, I went to the wiki and started reading the timeline of the Fallout universe. I got really sucked into it, possibly because you're reading about the events that lead to this oncoming apocalypse you know is going to happen, and it's always fun reading what led up to it. If it feels like the writers put a lot of their own philosophies into the lore itself, rather than just using it as a history lesson. I'm trying to think if there's a game that I've really gone down the lore hole. In recent memory, I tend to, generally speaking, be a little more focused on the narrative than the lore in most media. I think the broad exception to that is Lost for me, in which the narrative was important to me, but the lore was probably just as important to me. It was sort of part and parcel with my enjoyment of that series, and I enjoyed the fact that the show would constantly play with the fact that if you were into the lore beyond the average viewer, that you were rewarded for careful attention, that you were rewarded for indulging and obsessing over that. It was kind of a push and pull with the writers and the production designers in terms of sort of acknowledging a tip of the hat that you were invested in that. But I don't really, like with Metal Gear, I thought, well, maybe I should watch like an hour-long video that explains all the story and the characters and read a wiki or something. I just couldn't do it. That doesn't mean that I won't brush up a little bit ahead of time, especially if it's a series that it's more of it's a series that I've enjoyed, that I'd rather have that additional context. And there just aren't that many games where I feel compelled to have that setup. I think that may have something to do with the fact that I think a lot of lore and storytelling in games isn't very good. So the fact that I don't feel compelled to kind of look up what happened, what came before, what's setting these events in motion, may say something more about the games than it does about me. But I could obviously be in the wrong there, especially if you were to compare me to, let's say, one Vinny Caravella, given the fact that he is a man that goes deep into that lore hole. He dives down in. He might not come back out. Actually, when he does come out, he comes out with like 4 books, and he hands them to you and says, you would really enjoy these. You should read these. And you say, I should, but then you probably won't. And then he'll probably just read them again. But I'm curious if anyone in the chat has had any experience like just kind of getting lost in the fiction in a way that goes beyond just sort of the surface level stuff that you would experience if you are playing the game or experiencing kind of the general storytelling that's happening, as you click through the dialogue and kind of read through what's available in the game itself. Faded MFC. Speaking of Lost and the Update and the Rewatch podcast, have you started watching season 2 yet? I have not. Max has watched a decent portion of it. He has been extremely busy launching a new company, whose name the name slips my mind. But basically, it's a logistics and shipping and manufacturing company that is handling Exploding Kittens. Was their first big project, which is the game, the card game from Oatmeal, the web comic artist, in which. Max has just been extraordinarily busy handling that. So we do have plans to revisit it. I wish we had a timeline that was more firm for folks that are looking forward to further episodes of Rewatch Podcast, but it will happen. It's just a matter of us getting our timelines in sync. But as I've talked about in the past, to kind of make up for that, I am planning to start a horror podcast with my wife in the coming weeks. We're sitting down to figure out a name for it, getting some artwork commissioned, and hopefully have more to share at the beginning of October. So stay tuned for that in the near future. Meat Bass says, I went down into the Zelda fiction like crazy, even though it's all BS. I also massively went down the lore hole for all the Souls games. I will say, okay, so the one that I've gotten kind of interested and a little invested in is the Souls games, because I've become the Souls sort of reporter for Kotaku, and so I have been doing some stories about the lore, especially when Dark Souls 3 was announced, and trying to analyze exactly where does this fit in the timeline, given that it's a series that doesn't have a very precise timeline, or at least the fans have to interpret what that timeline is relative to the little bit of information that the designers actually provide to the players. So I guess Dark Souls and the Souls series would be the one time that I kind of pay attention in a way that I don't with other games, that is partially fueled by the fact that the audience I'm writing for is interested in that. And so even if I wouldn't necessarily spend all that much time with it, I tend to do that because I know the audience cares, and I'm trying to do right by them and be informed, be able to find interesting stories to tell about what's happening in the lore of those various games. Blackbox.cool, as Hasoon puts out in the chat. Anonymous asks, I've been caught in a rut where I can't stay focused on my writing for a solid couple of months now, and I also end up writing on a different topic. We're losing track of my original goal for writing was. Everything so far has been scrapped, so I want to know how you stay focused on the topic you are writing about. Well, sort of depends on what we're speaking about. So often, I stay focused on what I have to write about because it is my job, and I would presumably lose that job if I was not to write about the things that I have been assigned or said I was going to write about, especially when there are deadlines and I need to make sure there are things going up on Kotaku at a steady pace. To be clear, there are no post quotas. There are no incredibly strict requirements about what we have to write. But when you sort of declare, hey, I'm writing this story, it'll be ready by X, Y, or Z, it is then built in that other people work around that and don't have things prepared if that happens to fall through. Now, things can fall through. Not everything comes together exactly the way you want. But I guess I'm just saying sometimes I just write the things I have to write because I have to write them. Now, in my own personal time, when I was doing things a little bit more on my own, especially at Giant Bomb, where I kind of set my own pace, my own deadlines, I wasn't really working with anyone in that regard. Often, even if I felt like I'd sort of lost the plot on an article, that I wasn't really seeing the forest through the trees, I wasn't sure what the point of writing the article was, I would try and see it through. I would make my way to the end of the article the best that I could, even if I ended up scrapping it, even if I ended up rewriting it, even if I didn't feel it was my best work. Often, what's the most frustrating is not finishing something. And just finishing it, even if it's bad, is an accomplishment because it allows you to look back on it in a way that you can't when it is half written, when it is half formed, when you've only put down a paragraph or two and went, this isn't really going where I wanted to. It is much more fulfilling to have seen it all the way to some sort of conclusion so that you can look at the body of work that you have produced in that piece and say, okay, this isn't what worked, this is what worked. Because often what will happen is that you'll write, let's say 800 words, and you'll only find 300 words that work. But those 300 words are what you meant to write all along, and then you pull that out, you tease out the ideas there, and then you might have something that is worth sharing, that is interesting. And so while it's certainly tempting to just stop, move on, do something else, because that is certainly easier. And I'm not saying that this works every time, but if you're finding yourself undisciplined, if you're finding that you're not able to make it to the end of pieces that otherwise you would have, or you would have expected that you could have, just literally brute force it. Just find a way to get to the end, because if you do, you might find that you find a nugget, a sentence, a line, a phrase that speaks to you and allows you to write the piece that you wanted to do in the first place, or allows you to write a new piece that ends up being something worthwhile. Asanies? Patrick, now that Dan Reichert has fallen to the MOBA threat, how long is it until you finally try one out? I have been really thinking about trying Heroes of the Storm. I have heard enough positive things from folks who were not into those games, who have given Heroes of a Storm a shot and come back feeling like they have a better understanding of what makes those genres click. I don't have a whole lot of interest in going really deep on a MOBA to become an expert, to become someone who can speak authoritatively about it. But so I sort of dodged MMOs when they exploded due to World of Warcraft in the 2000s. I saw them as kind of a time sink, and I was interested in mostly narrative games. It also sort of happened at a time that I wasn't playing as many video games. I was in college or high school, and I was doing other things. And so now that genre is kind of winding down, and I don't feel like I need to have been an authority on it. Like that's not important to my job. But I feel like MOBAs are they're not going away, and I don't feel like they're going away anytime soon. And it is getting to the point where it is now embarrassing that I cannot say anything about them at all. All I can do is say they seem complicated, and that does, for someone who likes to be well-rounded, for someone that likes to be informed on a lot of what's happening in the gaming landscape, that can be able, when I speak an opinion about it, when I try to speak to it, that I can say so with some measure of information that is earned as opposed to just out of knee-jerk ignorance. I don't think I can continue to do that for MOBAs anymore. So I don't know when that's going to happen. It's probably going to happen when games slow down a little bit. I don't know how I would fit that in with Metal Gear Out, with me expecting Soma to end up in my lap either this week or next week, with me still working through Stasis, with me wanting to play Mad Max because it seems like the consensus among players is a little more positive than the consensus among critics about that game. I'm supposed to be playing Persona 4, even though I've not touched it in weeks, and now I'm feeling increasingly like that will never happen. There's a lot piling up. So Here's the Storm, fitting that in, putting in the commitment would be a challenge, but I do have every intention of getting around to that. And as long as I say that publicly, maybe then I will actually do it, and then maybe that will allow me to live the dream of one day playing Dota 2 with Brad Shoemaker. Because I feel like Dota 2, it'd be very easy for me to play that, fall off the ledge extremely quickly, not enjoy it, get put off from the genre, whereas if I play Here's the Storm, maybe that's where you dip your toe in, and you find that it's actually something to your liking, and that maybe you can take a step forward from there. Tom Servo 50, looking forward to Mario Maker coming out this week. That's right, that's another video game I don't have time for. I am looking forward to Mario Maker coming out this week. I think it's going to be exceptionally great fodder for streaming. I think it's going to be exceptionally great fodder for just seeing the creativity that sprouts up. What I'm curious about Mario Maker is if it will adhere to the 99 1% rule that sort of governed a Little Big Planet. So the idea is that if you have a game that is centered around user-generated content, in which there is a set amount of included material, but the vast majority of the replayability of the what you're supposed to get out of the experience is from things created by the community. In Little Big Planet, the 99 1% rule was that 99% of players made nothing, 1% of players made the stuff that everyone else indulged in. Now, will that be the case with Mario Maker? Will the ratio adjust a little bit? Because by all accounts, Nintendo has created something that is way more accessible than previous level editors and creation tools have been. I ran an article in Worth Reading on Friday over on Kotaku, in which a tiny cartridge writer, J.C. Fletcher, I believe, explained how his 2-year-olds were creating levels in Mario Maker. Now, they were simplistic. They didn't really grasp level design, but they were able to, with a little bit of help from the author, create stages in Mario Maker. And if that's possible, if it's easy enough for a 2-year-old to do it, maybe there is hope for a broader community to be creating a material for Mario Maker. And that's where that game is going to live or die, is based on the community, the viability of that community. It also makes me kind of bummed about the NX in some ways. I've long believed that the next handheld for Nintendo will drop 3D, even though I've loved the 3D on the 3DS. And I think there's reason to assume or believe or theorize that the NX, Nintendo's upcoming console, and maybe this will all be a hybrid, and this all kind of feeds in the same idea, probably won't have a gamepad screen, right? But with the Mario Maker, it feels like Nintendo, for the first time, truly, in the Wii U's lifespan, has justified the existence of the gamepad in a way that no other game has. And the idea that we would move on to the NX sometime in 2016 and then no longer have access to the peripheral that made Mario Maker possible would be kind of a bummer. That'd be kind of sad. Now, obviously, I would suspect that they would allow you to play Wii U games on the NX, and the gamepad might be compatible with the NX. But then does the gamepad become an accessory that only works with certain games? And so does that mean that because Mario Maker is a success, we don't get Zelda Maker and Metroid Maker? Or maybe the NX has a screen on the gamepad because the pricing has come down so much that they can afford to do it once again. I don't know. I'm confused. But I am excited for Mario Maker. I'll be probably preloading that sometime this week. I'm going back to Wisconsin this weekend for a golf outing with my dad's side of the family. So I really won't have time for games, but maybe I'll have time for a little bit of Mario Maker. But I say that every time I go up there, and I end up doing nothing except drinking and hanging out in a hot tub. So Mario Maker, you go on the list when I will play you Mario Maker. I'm not exactly sure. So as we wind this down, let's see if we can get one last question in. Nibishin 186, I thought the 99.9% rule of user-generated games was that there's a 1-1 world. Yeah, exactly. That's definitely true. I think we've gotten through most of the good ones. 50 books, 50 movies, said to Patrick. Any chance you could get spooked by Layers of Fear? It's an early access horror game. Yes, I'm hoping to do a Spookin' with Scoops this week. I'm not sure when. It'll either tonight or tomorrow. My wife's out of town, so I've got some extra time. But I think tonight or tomorrow. Probably tomorrow. Probably tomorrow. And Layers of Fear would definitely be a game that we check out. So let's say tomorrow for Spooking with Scoops, the return. It is a thing I want to get back on a weekly schedule, but like I said, my personal life has just been extremely busy, compounded by the regular amount of work that I have to do. So haven't been able to get to as many of that stuff as possible. But that's going to do it for 3 Beers Deep this week. Anyone who wants to check out an archive for this can go to youtube.com/PatrickKlepek. You can ask me questions during the week at my Tumblr page, patrickklepek.tumblr.com. Also, as some people have been mentioning in the chat, a Match 3, which is my weekly podcast with a freelance writer, Geeta Jackson, middle school educator, Sam Phillips. It's, I think, a pretty excellent weekly podcast that tries to take a broader picture on video games than just talking about what's the hot thing this week. Trying to go for something a little bit different there, and I think we've been pretty successful in the last couple of months. It's a pleasure to put together, so make sure and check that out at match3.simplecast.fm or look up Match 3 on iTunes, and please give us a review if you enjoy it. But you can also check out the archive of this in audio form on Inventory Management on iTunes or inventorymanagement.simplecast.fm. But that's going to do it. I will see everyone here tomorrow morning for a morning stream, and then hopefully Spooking with Scoops in the evening. I will announce on Twitter the exact timing of that when I figure it out myself, and then we will be back for 3 Beers Deep on Monday again. So thanks everyone for tuning in, and I'll see you later.